Fahrenheit 451, Detailed Retelling. Part 1, The Fireman's Awakening. Guy Montag is a fireman in a dystopian future society, but his job is not to extinguish fires, it's to start them. In this world, books are banned and firemen burn any that are discovered along with the homes that harbor them. The title Fahrenheit 451 refers to the temperature at which paper burns, a constant reminder of the society's mission to eradicate written knowledge. Montag initially takes pride in his work, finding satisfaction in the destruction of books and the control it represents. He lives in a sterile, technology-dominated world where people are constantly entertained by wall-sized television screens, immersive audio devices called seashells, and high-speed cars. Critical thinking is discouraged, and instant gratification is the norm. People live shallow, disconnected lives, avoiding deep conversations or meaningful relationships. The catalyst for Montag's transformation comes through his encounter with Clarice McClellan, a 17-year-old girl who is considered odd by society's standards. Unlike others, Clarice asks probing questions, observes nature, and thinks independently. She asks Montag if he's happy, a question that initially seems absurd to him but gradually plants seeds of doubt. Clarice represents everything the society has tried to eliminate: curiosity, individuality, and genuine human connection. Their conversations reveal the emptiness of Montag's existence. While he has always assumed he was content, Clarissa's questions force him to examine his life more closely. She tells him about a time when people weren't afraid, when they talked about important things, and when books were valued sources of knowledge and wisdom. Her perspective on life is radically different from the norm. She finds joy in simple things like walking in the rain, watching the sun rise, and having meaningful conversations with her family. Montag's growing unease is compounded by his relationship with his wife, Mildred. She is completely absorbed in the shallow entertainment provided by their society. Spending her days watching interactive television programs she calls her family. She wears seashells constantly, filling her mind with meaningless chatter to avoid confronting any uncomfortable thoughts or emotions. Their marriage is hollow, lacking genuine intimacy or communication. When Mildred overdoses on sleeping pills, Montag realizes how disconnected they have become. He doesn't even know if she intended to kill herself or simply lost count of the pills in her drug-induced haze. This mechanical approach to human suffering disturbs Montag and further contributes to his growing disillusionment. The contrast between Clarice's vibrant curiosity about life and Mildred's numbness becomes increasingly stark, highlighting the spiritual poverty of their civilization. Part 2. The First Transgression. Montag's crisis deepens during a particularly disturbing book-burning incident. The firemen are called to burn the books and home of an elderly woman who has been hoarding literature. What shocks Montag is not just the woman's defiance, but her ultimate choice to die with her books rather than live without them. She lights the match herself, choosing to burn alive rather than continue existing in a world without written knowledge. This act of martyrdom profoundly affects Montag. He cannot understand what could be so valuable in books that someone would die for them. The woman's sacrifice suggests that books contain something precious, something worth preserving at any cost. For the first time, Montag begins to see books not as dangerous objects to be destroyed, but as treasures containing human wisdom, emotion, and truth. In the aftermath of this incident, Montag makes his first transgression against the system. He steals a book. Initially, it's almost an unconscious act, but it represents a fundamental shift in his worldview. He hides the book in his home, though he's terrified to read it. The mere possession of the book fills him with both excitement and dread, as he knows he's crossing a line from which there may be no return. His relationship with Mildred deteriorates further as she remains oblivious to his internal struggle. She continues to immerse herself in meaningless entertainment, unable or unwilling to engage with Montag's growing questions about their society. When he tries to discuss the woman who died for her books, Mildred dismisses his concerns and changes the subject to her television programs. This disconnect highlights the gulf between those who are beginning to awaken to the reality of their situation and those who remain contentedly numb. Montag's behavior at work becomes erratic as his confidence in the righteousness of his job wavers. His fellow firemen notice his distraction, and Captain Beatty, his supervisor, begins to watch him more closely. Beatty is an intelligent man who understands the system they serve and the reasons behind it, making him a formidable opponent for anyone questioning the established order. The stolen book becomes a symbol of Montag's rebellion, but also of his isolation. He has no one with whom he can share his doubts and discoveries. Clarice, who might have understood his transformation, mysteriously disappears from the neighborhood. Some suggest she was killed in a car accident, but others hint that she and her family were removed because of their nonconformist views. Her absence leaves Montag even more alone in his questioning of society's values. Part 3. The Underground Revelation. Unable to contain his curiosity any longer, Montag begins reading the books he has secretly collected. However, he finds them difficult to understand without context or guidance. The isolation of his rebellion becomes apparent. Books are meant to be discussed, analyzed, and shared, but Montag has no one with whom he can explore these newfound ideas. The knowledge feels incomplete and frustrating without the community that should surround learning. Desperate for guidance, Montag remembers Faber, a former English professor he had encountered in a park a year earlier. During their brief conversation, Faber had revealed his love for literature and his sadness at its disappearance from society. At the time, Montag had considered arresting him, but had instead let him go. Now, Faber represents Montag's only hope for understanding the books he's trying to read. When Montag approaches Faber, the old professor is initially terrified, assuming this is a trap set by the authorities. However, Montag's genuine desperation and his willingness to risk everything convince Faber of his sincerity. Faber becomes Montag's mentor, explaining not just the content of books, but their deeper significance to human civilization. Faber reveals that books are valuable not just for their information, but for the quality of information they contain. Unlike the mindless entertainment that dominates their society, books encourage reflection, critical thinking, and genuine emotional engagement. They preserve human wisdom accumulated over centuries and provide multiple perspectives on life's complexities. Faber explains that their society destroyed books because they made people think, question, and sometimes feel uncomfortable emotions and thoughts that the government preferred to eliminate. The professor also introduces Montag to the concept of a resistance movement. There are others like them, people who recognize the value of literature and are working to preserve it. Some have memorized entire books, becoming living libraries to ensure that knowledge survives even if all physical books are destroyed. This revelation gives Montag hope that he's not alone in his awakening, but it also makes the stakes of his rebellion much higher. Faber provides Montag with a small radio device that allows them to communicate secretly. This technology becomes crucial as Montag must return to his job as a fireman, while secretly working to undermine the system from within. The dual life he must now lead creates enormous psychological pressure, as he must appear loyal to the regime while actually working to preserve what it seeks to destroy. Their plan involves gradually introducing books and ideas back into society, but it's dangerous and slow work. They must be extremely careful, as discovery would mean death or imprisonment in the psychiatric hospital, where nonconformists are treated until they accept society's values or are eliminated. Part 4. The Captain's Philosophy. Captain Beatty, Montag's supervisor, proves to be a complex and dangerous adversary. Unlike the typical enforcers of the regime, Beatty is highly intelligent and well-read. He understands literature and philosophy, which makes his role as chief book burner all the more sinister. Beatty represents the intellectual who is chosen to serve an anti-intellectual system, perhaps the most tragic figure in the novel. When Beatty senses Montag's growing rebellion, he doesn't immediately arrest him. Instead, he tries to win him back through persuasion, demonstrating his deep understanding of the very books he destroys. Beatty explains the historical progression that led to their current society, arguing that it wasn't imposed by a totalitarian government, but evolved naturally as people became lazier and more interested in quick entertainment than challenging ideas. According to Beatty, books became unpopular because they required effort to understand and often contained contradictory or disturbing ideas. As society became more diverse, books that might offend any group were gradually eliminated to maintain social harmony. Speed of life increased, attention spans decreased, and complex thoughts were reduced to simple sound bites. The burning of books was simply the final step in a process that society had already embraced. Beatty's argument is seductive because it contains elements of truth. He shows how their society eliminated conflict by eliminating complex ideas, how they achieved happiness by avoiding anything that might cause discomfort or disagreement. Everyone is kept busy and entertained. No one has time to think deeply enough to become dissatisfied. From this perspective, the firemen are not oppressors, but protectors of social stability and individual happiness. However, Beatty's philosophy ultimately reveals itself as hollow. While he can quote literature extensively, he uses this knowledge only to justify its destruction. He is become cynical and bitter, using his intelligence to serve a system that wastes human potential. His extensive knowledge makes his betrayal of learning all the more tragic. He knows exactly what society is losing, but chooses to destroy it anyway. The confrontation between Beatty and Montag becomes increasingly psychological. Beatty seems to understand Montag's internal struggle and takes pleasure in tormenting him with philosophical arguments. He quotes books while burning them, demonstrating the depth of his knowledge while simultaneously destroying the sources of that knowledge. This intellectual sadism reveals the true corruption at the heart of their society. It's not just the absence of learning, but the active perversion of it. Montag realizes that Beatty represents what he himself might become if he continues to serve the system while knowing its true cost. The captain serves as a warning of the spiritual death that comes from betraying one's deepest values for the sake of security and acceptance. Part 5. The Point of No Return. Montag's secret rebellion reaches a crisis when Mildred discovers his hidden collection of books. Her reaction reveals the depth of her conditioning. Instead of curiosity or understanding, she feels only fear and revulsion. She has been so thoroughly programmed by their society that the mere presence of books in her home terrifies her. She sees them not as sources of knowledge, but as dangerous contraband that threatens their safety and social standing. The discovery forces Montag to confront the reality of his situation. He can no longer maintain his double life, hiding his true beliefs while pretending to be a loyal fireman. His attempts to share his newfound insights with Mildred fail completely. She cannot or will not understand what he's trying to tell her about the value of literature and critical thinking. The gulf between them has become unbridgeable. In a desperate attempt to convert her, Montag reads poetry aloud to Mildred and her friends during one of their television viewing sessions. The women's reactions are revealing. One begins to cry without understanding why, touched by emotions she had forgotten she could feel. Another becomes angry and defensive, rejecting the poetry as dangerous nonsense. Their responses demonstrate both the power of literature to move human hearts and the difficulty of awakening people who have been conditioned to avoid deep feeling. The incident with the poetry reading has serious consequences. Mildred's friends report Montag to the authorities, unable to tolerate the discomfort his reading caused them. This betrayal represents the ultimate tragedy of their society. People have become so afraid of genuine emotion and thought that they will destroy those who try to reintroduce these human elements into their lives. When the fire alarm sounds, Montag realizes with horror that the address they're responding to is his own home. Mildred has turned him in, choosing the safety of conformity over loyalty to her husband. She has already left, taking her possessions and removing herself from the situation with cold efficiency. Her betrayal is not malicious, but mechanical. She simply cannot tolerate the disruption that Montag's awakening has brought to her carefully controlled existence. Captain Beatty is waiting for Montag at his house, enjoying the dramatic irony of forcing a fireman to burn his own home and books. This represents the system's ultimate cruelty, not just the destruction of knowledge, but the forcing of individuals to participate in their own spiritual destruction. Beatty's satisfaction in this moment reveals his sadistic nature and his particular hatred for those who dare to question the system he serves. The confrontation at Montag's house becomes the point of no return in his rebellion. He can no longer pretend to be loyal to a system that demands he destroy everything he has come to value. Part 6. Fire and Flight. The climactic confrontation between Montag and Captain Beatty becomes both physical and philosophical. As Beatty forces Montag to burn his own books and home, he continues his psychological torture, quoting literature while destroying it and taunting Montag about his naive belief in the value of books. Beatty's cruelty reaches its peak when he threatens to track down and harm Faber, the only person who has shown Montag kindness and understanding during his transformation. This threat against Faber triggers something primal in Montag. Unable to tolerate the idea that his mentor might suffer because of his rebellion, Montag turns the flamethrower on Beatty himself. The killing is both an act of protection and a symbolic destruction of everything Beatty represents: the intellectual who serves anti-intellectual purposes, the learned man who destroys learning, the human being who has chosen to become a machine of oppression. After killing Beatty, Montag becomes a fugitive. The other firemen attempt to capture him, but he manages to escape, though not without injury. The mechanical hound, a robotic tracking device used by the authorities, pursues him relentlessly. This chase represents the power of the technological state arrayed against the individual Montag. Newly awakened to human values, must flee from the mechanical forces that serve the dehumanized society. His flight takes him through the city he once served as a fireman, but now he sees it with different eyes. The emptiness and artificiality of the urban environment become apparent. The meaningless entertainment, the disconnected people, the absence of genuine life. The city that once seemed normal now appears as a wasteland of wasted human potential. Montag's escape is aided by Faber, who provides guidance through their secret radio connection. The old professor helps him evade capture by suggesting ways to confuse the mechanical hound's tracking systems. However, both men know that Montag can never return to his old life. He has crossed a line that makes reconciliation with the existing system impossible. The chase becomes a media spectacle, broadcast live to the entire city. The authorities use Montag's flight as entertainment and propaganda, demonstrating what happens to those who rebel against social order. However, when the real Montag proves too difficult to catch, the authorities kill an innocent man on live television, claiming he was the fugitive. This manipulation of reality for political purposes reveals another layer of the society's corruption. Not only do they control information, but they manufacture fake news to maintain their narrative of power and control. Montag's realization that an innocent man died in his place adds another burden to his conscience, but it also confirms that he has made the right choice in fleeing this society. Part 7. The Book People and New Beginnings. Montag's flight leads him away from the city and into the wilderness, where he discovers a community of intellectual exiles known as the Book People. These individuals have each memorized entire books, becoming living libraries to preserve human knowledge and culture. Led by a man named Granger, they represent hope for the continuation of human learning, despite the society's attempts to destroy it. The Book People have chosen a different form of resistance than Faber's subtle subversion. Rather than trying to change the existing society from within, they have removed themselves from it entirely, waiting for the inevitable collapse that they believe must come. Their approach is patient and long-term. They are preserving knowledge for future generations who will be ready to value it again. Granger explains their philosophy to Montag. They see themselves as living books, each person responsible for maintaining a specific work of literature or knowledge. When they die, they pass their memorized books on to others who will continue the preservation. This method ensures that even if all physical books are destroyed, the essential knowledge and wisdom of human civilization will survive. The community welcomes Montag, recognizing in him a fellow refugee from the anti-intellectual society. However, they also help him understand that his journey is just beginning. Carrying knowledge is not enough. One must also understand it, live by it, and eventually share it with others who are ready to receive it. Montag begins to memorize the book of Ecclesiastes, taking on the responsibility of preserving this ancient wisdom. As Montag settles into life with the book people, their predictions about society's collapse prove accurate. The city launches into a devastating war, which quickly escalates into nuclear destruction. From their safe distance in the wilderness, Montag and the others watch as the civilization that rejected knowledge destroys itself through its own technological power turned to violent purposes. The destruction of the city is both tragic and symbolic. The society that chose entertainment over education, conformity over creativity, and mechanical efficiency over human values ultimately cannot sustain itself. The war that destroys it seems almost inevitable, a civilization that cannot think critically about its choices will eventually make fatal ones. However, the novel ends on a note of hope rather than despair. As the book people prepare to return to the ruins of civilization, they carry with them the preserved wisdom of human culture. They represent the possibility of rebuilding society on better foundations with respect for knowledge, appreciation for individual thought, and understanding of the importance of books and learning. Montag's transformation is complete. He has evolved from a destroyer of books to a preserver of knowledge, from a servant of conformity to a guardian of human wisdom. His journey represents the possibility that individuals can awaken from cultural conditioning and choose a different path, even when that choice requires great sacrifice and courage. The ending suggests that the cycle of civilization may begin again, but with the hope that the preserved knowledge will help humanity avoid repeating the same mistakes. The book people are not just preserving literature, they are preserving the possibility of a more thoughtful, more human future. Love this summary? Hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell for more book wisdom.